Hello, Metal. Thanks a lot for joining us. Today, we are going to focus on what's going on with medicine and, of course, the coronavirus. I'm very, very honored to have Metal's own Daniel Kraft lead this discussion. Daniel has, well, I met him when he was doing the marrow minder. Did I get it right? Did I say it right?
The marrow miner. It's a medical device.
Yeah, miner, like it was mining, yeah. I think I saw that talk in 2005, maybe? Something like that?
Yeah, we don't actually that long.
Oh, wasn't that long? I don't know. I just remember it was like, God, that guy was so damn smart. I've seen Daniel on stage so many times. He's probably considered one of the top minds when it comes to medicine, next generation medicine. He is joining us. And we have a bunch of doctors on this call, which I'm really happy to say we'll meet Dr. John Nosta soon, and also Dr. Hellers, who's here, and whoever else is going to jump in. But Daniel, let's start right away. Where are we at? What really is going on? And if you look at the very beginning, let's just say this started in October, because some say that's when it started in China, October, came over to the United States somewhere around the end of January, March, April, where we saw this gigantic peak, and let's just call that peak at 10, and that peak could go as high as you want. Where are we right now, you think, in the United States at least?
I think most of you have seen those charts, and I think we never actually got off of our peak. Essentially, we kind of reopened in many ways in the U.S. too soon when you compare it to many other nations around the world who've kind of crushed the curve. Not that some resurgences aren't happening in places like Israel and Singapore, etc. But we're still far out of the woods, and in fact, it's getting much worse because we have more viral load, I think, now than we had certainly back in March. And it's shifted. We've seen some parts of the country have their surge, like New York, and now we have parts of the country that are, with ICUs that are overwhelming. And at the same time, case numbers going up, we're opening up Disney World. So I will try not to get political here, but it's hard not to be when it seems like this has not been driven by true public health and science, and the CDC has been neutered. And we saw yesterday now that they're not even getting the data from hospitals. So there's all sorts of complicating layers. It's just obviously, I think, not good where we are right now, and we're in a tough spot. So
again, politics and religion, we stay out of this conversation. I know it's a tough one, but let's maintain that, please. Let's talk. I want to real quick go to Dr. Robert Heller. Dr. Heller, could you unmute yourself? I know that you're involved in a few trials right now. You want to give us some updates? We're hearing some good news regarding some other companies that are going into bigger and bigger human trials. What's the update from your side?
Can you hear me, Ken?
Yep, we got you.
Good. I'm starting 2 clinical trials for the COVID virus vaccine, probably by the end of this month. One will be with Pfizer, and the other will be with Merck. And their plan is to test thousands of patients, healthy volunteers, and probably it'll be a 3 to 4 month vaccine trial. At that time, it'll be evaluated to see, it'll be too soon to get FDA approval, but possibly we'll get emergency use acceptance. So it may be ready by the end of the year.
And in your mind, and again, I'm keeping politics out of this, but you think that this is something that we will see some type of vaccine that's publicly distributed before the end of October?
No, it won't be before the end of October.
Okay.
Maybe by the end of the year or the first part of next year.
Got it.
I can't see it being developed that quickly, and certainly not distributed to a large population before the 2021.
All right, got it. So Daniel, kind of take us on a journey, guys. If you have a question, comment, something you want to ask, please put it inside the chat. Daniel, I felt that last time we had this conversation, there were so many different questions of where things were. And even at that time, we didn't have real answers. We were kind of guessing. And I kind of feel like we're still somewhat guessing. What can you 100% tell us is for sure? What is this?
That we're still in a very you can have your mac and cheese.
Oh, I want mac and cheese too. Anyone else? Mac and cheese?
I'm in.
So I may pop out for a second to get the next use. But I would say, I mean, it's still a novel coronavirus. I'm going to try and pull up a chart and share it. Like, we're still learning a lot. I mean, even since our last call, a ton has come up in terms of what we're learning about the science, the immunology, the ability to treat it, with old drugs like steroids, that have been used for heart disease or respiratory issues for a long time. So I'm going to try and, I'm not going to find the slide right now, but we're learning a lot. And so things are getting somewhat better on the clinical side. Where there's a lot of debate about, just because the rates have gone up in terms of testing, the death rates haven't gone up. We're still in a lag period for that in many states. So I think we're in a better position understanding the disease. It's a clotting disease in many patients, a lot of heterogeneity in terms of understanding who's at risk. Big social determinant elements play a role. But we're still not all rowing together as a nation where, if you pee in a swimming pool in one corner, it's going to distribute. So we really need better strategies to mitigate this, and then use those lessons to improve public health for the next pandemic, because we're still going to have the flu in the fall. And other things that might overlap. And the other point would be, and that's where I'll introduce John in a little bit, all the new innovations and digital layers that are happening, the ways that healthcare in some forms is improving. Many of us have now done our first virtual visits, or new ways we can use monitoring at home to pick up with the pulse oximeter, who's doing well. Jordan Schlane was on last time describing, for those of you who aren't here, is a physician who's been on metal, spent some time in a fever tent in New York City 2 months ago. And his little test was just having someone not just wear the pulse oximeter and say they were 98%, but jump up and down and see their exercise tolerance. So sometimes simple things can be learned and distributed. So there's a lot of amazing collaboration coming together. One thing I'll end on this is we need testing, and we need rapid, cheap, available testing if we're going to get back to school or work, something that might even be done every other day. And not really trying to plug this, but I've been involved with XPRIZE, and hopefully next week, and we're going to roll out this new rapid, cheap, effective, easy COVID testing XPRIZE that is going to move very quickly, so that by the fall, hopefully we've identified new platforms to enable you to do a test for under $5 and do that at your school or your workplace. And so we need new collaborations there.
I mean, the tests are fairly inexpensive, aren't they? The antigen test is only like $10, right?
Well, I think there's the charge, and there's the test and the price and what it actually costs. A lot of those are now sort of swab and send, so they're more cheap when you send it off to a central laboratory, but there's still like 5-day or 7-day delays right now in some parts of the country. So we really want the ability for your kid or you to walk into the metal office and get not swabbed with that painful thing that goes back your nose, but an easy one, or spit, and have that result in 15, 20 minutes. And
well, check this out. So yesterday we got tested yesterday. It took 6 hours, which was expedited. Gary College, you just got tested today. How long did it take to get results back?
10 minutes for the antigen test.
10 minutes.
10 minutes.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so, it's a new company that was approved with an EUA just a couple days ago, company out of Ohio, and it's 96% accurate.
Wow. By the way, Gary, your virtual background's amazing. It really does. It looks like you're in your mother's kitchen. Okay. So, Daniel, where are we going to go now if testing is, we're starting to see at least some decent testing. I heard some number like 40 million have been tested in the United States. Number 2 is India at 12 million. So the more and more we test, the more and more cases we'll see. You're saying that deaths have slowed down. I've seen the numbers also. Are we seeing the deaths slow down because of something you said on the last call, and that is the weak have already died? That's something you said. So is that the case?
I don't think that's exactly the case.
I think Jordan's the one who said it because he's the ballsy one, right?
That's like Jordan. Some have in nursing homes, et cetera. I mean, still, most of the morbidity and mortality has been in older folks, and a huge percentage of the first 100,000 were in nursing homes and facilities like that. But now we're seeing all these younger folks, and we're definitely seeing younger folks die from it, even 20s and 30s that are healthy. But there's a bit of a lag, right? You still don't see, new infections are detected, but the folks who end up dying might take 2 or 3 weeks in some cases. They may be intubated and on a ventilator, or some may be discovered at home. So I think we're going to see a lag there. And I think it's a false dichotomy to argue about the number of tests and the number of deaths. One of the other things that's involved, even the last month or two, is that we see these long-term sequelae, folks who almost have what's the equivalent of like a chronic fatigue type syndrome and are having a lot of trouble with respiratory and other elements and energy and other symptoms that are lasting for now months. So there may be also as well as neurologic impacts, because this again seems to be a bit of a hematologic clotting disease. And so there may be much longer downstream impacts, just like the mental health impacts for those who never get infected are going to have downstream sequelae too. So this is, more people will die of COVID than from COVID, I think, in the big picture.
All right. By the way, I'm just looking at some of the chat. Ryan just said he got his tested last week. He still hasn't got his results back. He went to Forward. Lonray, you got it in 10 minutes. And Gary, you just said you got it within 15 minutes. So it's different tests. Now, we have to understand there's two different tests, right? The antigen, and then we have the antibodies. And no one has one test that does both. You have to take two separate tests, right?
Right. You could theoretically, usually blood for antibody, and there's some other ones looking at T cells and other forms of immunity. But yeah, the antibody test, $10 in 15 minutes, not a big deal. It's almost like getting a pregnancy test. Those are getting better and better. But one of the challenges with all these tests is just apples to oranges. Some of them use very different platforms, have different sensitivity, specificity, and it matters more if you get an antigen test right or wrong than an antibody one. So there's one of the things we're trying to do this X Prize is create a very common, smart way of testing. So if you're a company with a new platform, you'll get a set of 100 samples, and 15 of them will be positive. Can you detect those? Then the winners of that will end up going to schools and workplaces, and not just have the test, but the whole workflow element. How do you do the testing? How do you get the result back digitally? How do you sort that information? How do you share it? Another group is working on passporting. Eventually we're getting hopefully back to international travel. How do you show that you either have the antibody or you're antigen negative? There's lots of other layers that go beyond the pure test piece.
Can you introduce to Dr. John, please?
Well, we'll give him an honorary doctor. John's an old friend and faculty member at Exponential Medicine, who is sort of, I think, the sort of leading maven in digital health. And that's something that's been certainly, I'll let John talk to this, sort of catalyzed, but what he defines digital health. So I thought part of this conversation, we have an hour, 45 minutes left, is we talk a bit more about COVID, but I want John to share about what he's seeing sort of in innovation, exponentials, and digital. And I think that applies to lots of metal folks and crosses fields. So I want to make sure we have that discussion. But John, why don't you maybe do a better introduction of yourself and share about what you're seeing on what's happening with health and digital and COVID.
Thanks, Daniel. It's always a pleasure. I learned everything I need to learn from Daniel in 15 minutes for a 1-hour program, because it's always concentrated. It's a pleasure to be here. So my background actually is in cardiovascular physiology, although my pedigree is very thin. I left all the academic programs and ended up working in advertising and marketing. So my job is basically looking at the diffusion of innovation, not the idea, but how a system can adapt or change. And that's what I've spent a variety of time looking at systems and system change. So what I'm seeing with COVID is sort of the proverbial inflection point. How many times, Daniel, have we talked about exponential change and the inflection point? And sure enough, the inflection point was not mediated by technology, but it was mediated in essence by COVID. And what I saw was almost a triple inflection point, if you will, where technology became available, the regulatory posture around technology, for example, telemedicine. Telemedicine went from becoming a taboo to something that regulators wanted to happen. And thirdly, this profound moral imperative that this was the right thing to do. So for me, that's what I saw a lot of. It's sort of this newfound inflection point shifting around those three parameters. So, with respect to COVID, and this is, I've become more confused over time and really begin to understand what's going on. I live in New Jersey, just outside of New York, not too far from Bergen County. So I was in close to ground zero, and I'm fascinated by the fact that New York for the past 3 days has had 0 deaths, that something has evolved or changed, which fascinates me. Is there some kind of intrinsic cycle to the condition? There's still a lot of people who are susceptible to this condition. There's still a lot of old people. There's still a lot of homeless people, particularly in New York and even in Los Angeles, where I'm not seeing that population wiped out in a strange way. So to me, it's real interesting. Certainly been tracking the deaths, how there seems to be a disproportionate ratio to the occurrence, the incidence, particularly in Florida, to the death rate. And I know that's a lagging indicator, but we're a week or two into this. So it's been real interesting to me. So I'm curious about what the group thinks about that. But one thing is sure, that we are in this sort of profound inflection point mediated by a variety of changes, not the least of which is COVID itself.
So we got a few doctors in here. Gary, you actually just said all the deaths in New York are now from homicide, not COVID. I know you're smiling at that, but maybe there's a. All right, let's. Dave Winston, you wanted to jump in there? Dave Winston, unmute yourself. Who's based in DC?
Actually, Daniel just gave me the answer that I was looking for. What I was looking for, and I don't know, John, if you have anything to add to this, what are the like one or two national level policies that you think could be put into place to really sort of help things, or do you think at this point it's all local? Just your sense of that.
No, I think that real quickly, I think there are two things that come to mind. One is the holy grail of medicine, which is billing and reimbursement. Right. I mean, right. Unfortunately, we're in that system in the United States. So number one, if we could accommodate some kind of cross-state telemedicine dynamic, that would be interesting. Number two, right now, if I need telemedicine, I need a doctor in New Jersey. And I think that is just fundamentally wrong. The second is the whole licensing and nature of being approved for telemedicine. So those are fundamental changes that are policy-based that I think would go a long way.
By the way, you might want to know that there's been a joint letter in terms of the Senate to HHS dealing with all the telemedicine sort of suspensions they did in terms of regulations to making those permanent. And to give you a really bipartisan, I think it was 15 Republicans and 10 Democrats signing a letter. I haven't seen that in a while. So to your point, there is some concern about addressing that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
In the chat, I answered maybe just to David. I think what we need going forward, beyond sort of smart, rapid, cheap, available testing, are sort of good you cross the state line and might have different rules, being very smart and localized about mask wearing and other public health measures, and hopefully a cadre of leveraging digital and beyond contact tracing, which is the idea that that can be analog, but it also can be digitized. And we might want to have a cohort of like volunteer EMS and volunteer firefighters that folks become volunteer contact tracers in the future and help sniff these things out in the bud, whether it's COVID or the next pandemic.
Go ahead, John.
That's just real interesting. As a first responder and someone who has been involved in sort of the local first aid squad and fire department and that kind of thing, Daniel, I think that's a really interesting idea. I mean, the definition of first aid is the immediate and temporary care given to an injured or sick person, and the services of a physician can be obtained. And I think contact tracing is a wonderful opportunity where, the first responder population could be empowered, because I think they're an eager group. They really kind of get into it. They're very, very selfless in terms of, being active in public. So I think that's a very interesting idea.
Guys, I want to talk about vaccines again, because I think it's something we need to touch upon. Because I know that the population of at least my friends that are at least over 50 years old, or some have had heart conditions or pre-existing conditions, they're not going to leave their home. They're very, very proactive, saying, hey, I'm not going to go out until there is a vaccine. When we see Moderna announce something where they're going into 30,000 person trials right now, Dr. Heller says, hey, we're going to get something, but not to the end of the year. Is there any potential way to expedite something? Or are we literally not looking until next year to having some type of vaccine?
So high level, remember what a vaccine does is hopefully, tricks your immune system into building that immunity, whether it's antibody-based or T-cell based. So there's one test, what's been done so far in sort of the phase 1 and phase 2 by companies like Moderna are to give, in this case, RNA to turn into the protein that your body then responds to. And so you can measure that, and the initial work looks promising. Does that mean that you'll still be protected against a real COVID infection, is question number one. And so I'm not sure if they're going to have volunteers trying to get infected, but they're probably going to more have those 30,000 folks and see if there's a decline in folks that would have otherwise been expected to. And then there's a safety issue, so you can't really speed up. Some of the unknowns might be that your body has an autoimmune response to the antigen that reacts in different ways in different people. Or there's been examples in other coronavirus things like for dengue, where you might have a slightly different strain and you were previously immunized, your immune system has a very almost dangerous overreaction. So just like, you can't make 9 women have a baby in 1 month, there's something that just takes some time, especially on the safety side. And I think 3 months ago, Ken, you asked how many medical guys on the call would go out and get a vaccine if it was FDA approved. It was a pretty low percentage, which is a bit.
It was. I could do another poll. Matter of fact, let me see if I could write one right now. Eric, you say you're in trials right now?
Correct. Correct.
Want to explain what you're working on?
Yeah, so we have another product in FDA trials right now for cancer and tumor reduction using scorpion venom and natural minerals. And we modified that, and now we have our own scorpion farm and all that kind of stuff. But now the FDA accepted us into a trial based on research that came out of Wuhan using venom for specifically against coronavirus to numb the receptors and then actually kill the virus in the bloodstream. But we keep getting our phase 1 test results pushed back every week. And I've never been through this, so I'm just wondering if that's a normal procedure. I mean, it's probably 3.5 weeks past their deadline.
Anyone?
And treatments, nobody that's for treatment. I mean, everybody on that list that we looked at, we know everybody who's in the process, and it's 92% vaccines, very low treatments.
So let's do this, guys. Here, I'm going to just send this out. Here you go. There's your poll. Would you, if there's a vaccine available right now, would you take it? And I'm just going to let you guys get in here. We're at 60%.
While everybody's voting, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Since I'm the non-physician, I only like to play a doctor, right? So there's this T-cell based immunity. I don't understand that versus a other type of immunity. Also, I think the Moderna vaccine was twice or 3 times the quote natural immunity. How do we put that into perspective? You know, number one, I hear that people don't develop antibodies from the natural exposure to the COVID virus. So number one, is a vaccine possible given that weird immunological response in real life? And what is double and triple? And what is T-cell immunity relative to that?
I can answer that.
Dr. Heller.
Yeah, the Moderna control, by the way, there was only 45 people that got the vaccine. And no one over the age of 55, I think, got the vaccine. They were all between 18 and 50. So what they found is that between 1.8 and 2.8 times normal response as compared to people who actually got the coronavirus infection. So it's not a natural immunity. It's a imposed immunity by the vaccine, which is the other part of this is that you can develop an immunity, but does that mean you can be protected against disease? And we don't know that either. The reason, Ken, that this takes so long is besides getting the volunteers to volunteer and getting all the protocols together based on these early studies, because only 45 human volunteers have taken the Moderna vaccine and less than 100 the Pfizer vaccine. You've got to test really thousands of people to see the safety of this. And it takes, and all these vaccines are 2 injections a month apart. So there you have 3 months already that it takes to analyze the results, a month after the second vaccination, which is 2 months.
And that's it. It's literally a time parameter. You have to go through this process of a time sequence to make sure it's going to work.
Well, I think to protect people, I think that's very logical.
Yeah. But you're not going to go out. You're not going to go out till there's a vaccine, correct?
Very limited. I'm not going to, of course, I'm going to be isolated and protect myself until there's a vaccine that I know is effective and safe.
And if you could see the results from that poll, 52% of the people in this group would not take. Matter of fact, if you take the no and nevers, you're looking at over 60% saying they will not take a vaccine.
You know, it's important at this time to make this vaccine not only because of the pandemic, but almost 50% of the population is anti-vaccine of any type right now.
Yeah.
And if you get a bad result and a lot of illness, morbidity, or mortality from this vaccine, that'll only increase the amount of people who will be shy away from taking vaccines of any type.
You're in a tough situation. We're in a tough situation then. In order for this to work, we have to vaccinate what percentage of the population to make sure this doesn't pop up again? What's the numbers, Dr. Heller?
It's not necessarily the percentage of the population. You have to vaccinate people who have enough variety in both ethnic variety, cultural variety, country variety, as well as age, from very young to very old. And you have to see what diseases they have and see if the vaccine aggravates the disease they already have in some other way. So you have to get at least several thousand people to go through a phase 3 trial.
Exactly, because the first folks in the phase 1, you usually take someone with nothing else. They're completely healthy. They're under 50. They've got no comorbidities. In reality, we want folks of every age some have diabetes, some heart disease, some certain medications may interfere, who knows? So that's part one. And then we don't yet know whether you'll need a booster or whether, just like the flu, it might have different strains, or the immunity wanes. You'll need a booster every year or 5 years, like some of us need with tetanus.
We don't even know the dose yet. We're still grading the dose depending on the responses, the antibody response. So that's an ongoing thing too.
Let me go to Jake. Jake, you got a question? Go for it, Jake, and then I'm going to call upon David. Jake?
Hey, how are you?
Put your camera on, Jake.
Oh, sorry. Hold on one second.
There you are.
The hair's a little crazy. So I thought that this was an RNA-based disease where, the virus goes into your cell and uses like RNA polymerase and recreates itself. And I thought that we had never made a successful vaccine for viruses that work like that, such as HIV and other things. So is that not the case? What's kind of the science behind the specifics of the actual vaccine working with this type of virus?
Dr. Heller?
Well, you're right. This is the first time, and so this is all new stuff. And so far, the two companies, which are Pfizer and Moderna, have RNA messenger vaccine, and it does seem to stimulate a good response against the virus.
Okay, so this would be the first time. David, you're saying hepatitis was one of the first, right? David, why don't you unmute yourself, and you had something you want to add?
Yeah, no, I was just looking, and I think a bunch of things we have, it looks like a bunch of things we have vaccines for are RNA or recombinant viruses. Is that not correct? I found
recombinant, yes.
Yeah. So polio, SARS, flu, measles.
Right.
Oh, it's not true that we've never had a vaccine for an RNA virus.
Well, mumps is somewhat based on an RNA virus, so there has been recombinant and combination genetic, stimulation. But this is the first time that we're developing from fragments of the virus using RNA as a messenger.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Okay, again, we're not going to go politics on this, but let me ask a question that seems to bleed in the politic direction.
Good luck.
Daniel Kraft, school, bringing kids back to school. I understand being a parent. What do I do with my kid staying home now for another semester? I get that. But this discussion regarding school, other countries are doing it. What's your thought moving forward regarding school coming up next month?
I think for a lot of these things, it's like politics is local. I mean, so you can't have one size fits all. I know and we're still learning. Like Cuomo says, you have to look at the data and decide what we're doing in October now. I think there's some disturbing evidence out of Israel that had pretty well tamped down the disease, and they returned to school arguably a bit early, and there was some politics involved there, and they're having a big resurgence. There was something I saw in the news today about in Florida, how many kids are testing positive. And while the kids may not have morbidity, the risk to their teachers or grandparents or parents may be high. So we don't necessarily know yet. I think there's different designs. So my 6-year-old Leo has just been in summer camp for 3 weeks, but they have been positive 12, and they have them pretty well separated, wearing masks inside. Now, is that sustainable for certain school systems where they have 60 kids per class? Probably not. So it may depend, and then we may learn what the playbook is, including hopefully having testing, once or twice a week for every kid. Even not doing every kid, you could do cohorting. You might test 10 kids, and if there's a positive, you close the whole class. So I'm sort of shirking the answer to say it sort of depends, and we're still learning, but it's probably not safe to just say, everyone open your doors and go back to school as usual.
It's interesting. Gary just said, Gary, that number is fascinating. You said 31% of kids in Palm Beach County, Florida are tested positive COVID. So it's kids get it. And are they showing symptoms, or are they just carriers? Does anybody know the answer to that? Are we seeing kids carry the virus where they're not showing symptoms, or are we see them actually coming down with something?
Most are carriers.
Yeah, they're not getting sick. I think in Florida, 4 kids in the whole state have died. So it's very low numbers.
So again, not going politics, it's tough. I don't understand the mask, no mask issue. It just seems you go in a public space, you wear a mask. I was shocked to see Target's not going to do that mandatory mandate until August 1st, which blows my mind. What is the argument? Can anybody somehow bring it down to a non-political level of what the big deal of masks are?
Or religious. You could bring religion in.
Yeah, you can't do either or. But can anybody explain what it is? Is it a freedom issue? Is
No,
it?
it's one word, stupidity.
No, but
And leadership. They've been told by their leaders that it's unnecessary and bad, and
That's political.
but
Ah.
why is that case? I'm
I
kind
didn't
of
say who it was. It might have been Hillary Clinton for all I know.
no, but that's not what I'm asking, guys. Why is there a even premise that wearing a mask? Because I'm seeing the whole argument where wearing a mask is bad. You know, I have to admit.
I'll try, Ken, if you want.
Yeah,
I've
Gary,
read-
try, please.
Dave Caulton has read the same stuff. So a good friend of Metal, member of Metal, Michael Robertson, has been like, he's probably tweeted 4,000 times the same CDC studies that show like a dozen different randomized controlled trials that showed that masks made no difference in transmission of influenza virus in a variety of circumstances. And so he always falls back to that and seems to ignore all the data from other countries where they're using masks and not having spread. But he says he'll only believe trials, randomized trials, and that's
but
the
Gary,
only reason it's out there.
Gary, there are two sides to this. One is how beneficial, if at all, are masks, and I'm sort of shocked. I've tried to look, and you'd think something like that would have been studied really, really extensively, but it seems like it just hasn't. I think the medical community has said there's just a face validity to it, and you're sort of like, what's the harm, and why would I want my surgeon leaning over me without a mask on? I think so there's plenty of, maybe I can poke holes in how beneficial it is. Then I'm with Ken. The idea that, like, maybe it's only a little beneficial or it doesn't work all that well. There's some evidence that it does. There's some evidence that it doesn't. Why you would then say, because of that, and I really think it's important we open up the economy, I'm not going to wear masks because
I'm still lost on that.
Yeah.
I'm with you guys. I was just reporting what Michael said.
No, I get that. Wearing a mask and opening the economy are two different. I mean, they're.
You know what?
No, they're not. They're not. If you want to open the economy, you should wear masks.
No, I agree with that. What I'm saying is, yeah, without a doubt. I'm just lost. Somebody was going to say something. I apologize.
Let me jump in and throw gasoline on the fire. What about guns? Like, why does the United States have so many guns?
Well, no. A different conversation.
Wait. Let me finish.
Protect ourselves from the masks.
No. My point is that when you look at South Korea, at some European countries, they have more of a monolithic kind of worldview. They tend to get in line more easily. And I think the United States is intrinsically kind of founded on that independent spirit, mediated by the Constitution and by politics. So I really do think that it's something innate in the country, and that spirit of independence can be fostered for right and for wrong reasons. So that's what I've always seen. You know,
I have a different thing, which is it's. If this was airborne Ebola and it was 99%, transmittable, and I was worried it was going to hurt me and a mask would prevent that, we'd all be wearing masks tomorrow.
Yeah.
The weakness is I'm young and healthy and I'll be okay, and a mask is kind of shitty. And I mean, like I go biking with a mask and it's, hard for cardiovascular activities and all that. But I think it's really a weakness that, like, we very quickly realized this is something that only happens to a small percentage of people, and a bunch of us aren't very altruistic and are like, I'll just
I don't know if it's a small group of people. And I know the numbers. Dr. Heller, we were at a medal, I think the first week of February, and I said as much as 2% of the world population is going to get it. Everyone kind of laughed, but we're on track for that, aren't we?
Yeah, it's as everyone knows, the peaks and the rates of infection are skyrocketing, and unless we do something to control it, no one else is going to do it for us.
Yeah.
So, to be clear, I don't mean in any way to minimize it. I'm a huge fan of this.
I agree.
This is a horrific disaster if we let it run. What I'm saying is there are a bunch of people in this country who can reasonably convince themselves that the odds of them dying from it are 0.5%, even if they get it. And, there's some old people, but, they're close to the end anyway. It's just going to push them over the edge. basically I feel safe, so I'm not scared, so I don't feel like I need to do anything.
Well, that's the main
would-
problem, though.
Yeah.
That's what's
Oh,
going-
yeah.
Most people don't. Most people have never seen the camera footage of two people talking loudly in a room with no air circulation.
Yeah.
So there's macro, micro, nano droplets, and smaller, and the bigger ones fall for the spit comes out of your mouth when you speak, and
Totally.
the bigger ones fall to the ground. The nanoparticles can float in the air for anywhere between 30 and 65 minutes. They've tracked.
People don't
this
realize
stuff.
the biggest problem with churches wasn't talking, it was the singing.
Yeah.
Singing's a big issue.
Right.
It really is. So Daniel, I want to go back to you now. So without a doubt, we know masks are necessary. We get that. We understand that a vaccine is somewhere around us. Let's talk about some of the precautions, and maybe you guys could contribute to this. Dave Asprey, I know you guys roll your eyes at Dave Asprey, but he said, hey, right away, let's make sure we do D and magnesium and all these type of remedies, or not remedies, but things on the other side to be more preventive. Is there anything you would suggest that we can take, ingestibles or something, to make sure at least we're staying healthy to fend ourselves off against the disease, or if we get it, to be strong enough to fight it?
Great question. I think before I answer that, or try to, I want to just riff on part of the last conversation. A bit of this whole thing is a bit of an infodemic versus pandemic, and not to get political, but if you watched certain channels like Fox versus CNN, you'd have different perceptions and different behaviors, and folks who watch Hannity at a higher morbidity rate. And this is the question would be also to folks who are on the call here who said they wouldn't take vaccine. How do we understand why or why not, and how do we start to mitigate those concerns? Because if 50% of folks don't take the vaccine, we're going to end up not in big trouble. So that's a question. Then on your second part, I'm not aware of any to date knowledge that vitamin D is great. Certainly getting your sleep in, staying cardiovascularly healthy, taking care of your mental health, all those things are going to play a role in your risk for and your immune response to almost any disease. So this has been a time for some of us to sort of get on top of our general overall health. And certainly vitamin D, I haven't seen the data, potentially would be helpful. But
I don't know. I just, it's all hearsay. It's all hearsay. That's why I was wondering if there's anything that says definitely be getting your vitamin D, do these type of things. You're saying you have not seen anything. I'm not sure. Is anyone else? Dr. Heller, have you seen anything on a preventative side or to make sure that your immune system's strong enough side?
Well, the matter of vitamin D, there's some studies to show that if you're low in vitamin D, that you're more susceptible and that more people are get infected and have a poor result. The other things are zinc, magnesium, and nicotinamide has all been shown in certain studies to help protect us. And so getting adequate levels of zinc, I think would be a good idea because it does share a receptor with the ACE inhibitor. And other than that, I don't think there's anything else that you can do except stay out of its way. The only other thing you can check, and if you've ever had a blood count, to see if you have a lymphopenia, which is a reduction in your lymphocytes or a reduction in your white blood cells. And for some of these people are more susceptible to a COVID storm.
Neil Cannon, I know you like to do the body hacking. I get it, which is cool. But Neil, you want to jump in there and say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say just quickly on the protective measures, and I have mentioned in the Metal Lounge before that a friend of mine had really severe symptoms a few months ago, and she was struggling to breathe. She kept on punching her chest like this. And I said, look, go and check out this article by Dr. McCullough on IV vitamin C, ozone therapy, vitamin D. She looked at it. She took action immediately. 2 days later, she called me and goes, Neil, you've saved my life. It's completely gone. So all I did was share information with her from a functional medicine source who I trust, Dr. McCullough. And there's some other people, functional medicine crew, I really follow them a lot. So I think there's a lot that we can do to protect the immune system, like getting rid of chronic inflammation for a start, but also things like moderate dosage vitamin C, which we can take orally as well, like 3 or 4 grams a day, but staggered over the course of the day. And anything we can do, because our best defense is our immune system, ultimately.
Can I chime in? Just a quick question. Am I on?
Yeah, you're on. We got you.
Cool. So Daniel mentioned pulse oximetry. you know, and I think if ever a day a device has come, you know, we look at a live core and a simple ECG recording, maybe for atrial fibrillation, maybe for QT prolongation with other therapeutic modalities. But it seems to me that that might be an interesting device. Daniel, is there a way of looking at leukopenia or some very crude measurement of some immune compromise? I mean, can we do that in a digital health modality?
I mean, eventually you can have a little microfluidic chip you set
Yeah.
on your phone and do that, but that goes with certain viral infections, but it's pretty non-specific.
Yeah.
I do think I love Neil's comment about, you know, functional medicine. I like functional integrated medicine is something we need to be doing more of.
Mhm.
And vitamin C may be great, or the other things that were mentioned. The challenge we've seen with, like, take the example, although politicized, of hydroxychloroquine or chloroquine, is that you get these anecdotes, and, you know, many people are going to get better on day 6 or 7 or 12 anyway. How do you say this really prevented it or helped speed it up or cured it? And so when you end up doing the randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial, everything's a bit of a wash, you know, for certain drugs, or have harms like hydroxychloroquine. So there may be some things out there. One of the potentials in digital health and beyond is, how do we build crowdsourced clinical trials? How do each of us sign up and say, hey, we're all taking different doses of vitamin D or vitamin C, and we end up as a cohort doing better than the cohort that doesn't, so that we can learn, because some of these things are almost impossible to do in the old-fashioned clinical trial sense.
You know, everybody goes yelling and screaming about well-controlled clinical trials, prospective clinical trials on, let's say, things like hydroxychloroquine. I could just imagine the outcry when we crowdsource a clinical trial and have such a relatively loose constraint. But I think that's the mindset that we have to begin people to shift to, that sometime well-controlled anecdotal data in some strange way may become a new type of trial. You know, maybe it's not a well-controlled clinical trial. Maybe it's a
crowdsource.
Yeah, I mean, crowdsource. Yeah, but
What's wrong with that? It sounds like with the technology today. I mean, look at contact tracing in China. They contact traced by utilizing WeChat to know who is with who, so they could at least find out where the catalysts were, those pivotal points. Why couldn't we do that under a crowdsource idea of different trials? It would make sense. At least I think it would.
There's the big power in crowdsourcing. It depends on what you're talking about. Sometimes you can crowdsource literally. You can download an app, have the drug sent to you. You can all report in. Patients like me did versions of that. There's a company out of Israel that I'm involved with. It's just about to come out of stuff called StuffThatWorks.health. Terrible name, but it's also founded by one of the co-founders of Waze. Waze crowdsources your driving. They're now basically doing that for different diseases, including COVID, where you can join a community, share all your symptoms, and from that, with machine learning and AI, they're starting to extract, you know, what works for migraines or certain forms of inflammatory bowel disease or psoriasis, and getting much more narrow groups. So it's not exactly COVID focused, but the ability now for us to share digital and other data is going to end up being part of this future healthcare that's going to be catalyzed by COVID.
Alex, you wanted to chime in there? You heard something about an inhalant. Do you want to ask that question? Alex. Come on, Alex Riggs. Chime in here, buddy. I'm unmuting you. I guess not. Alex is not gonna. I have heard about using what's it called? An inhaler. What's it called when it's not inhaling, but it's like a mask you put over your face and you breathe in.
Nebulizer?
Nebulizer?
Yeah, nebulizer. Nebulizing Bira. I can't pronounce it. See what Alex says? It's another way, but you inhale this. Yes.
Anti-inflammatory.
It's an anti-inflammatory, and I heard you use it in the first couple of days. One of the metal guy just recently got COVID. Did it within the first 40 hours. Doesn't have any symptoms at all anymore. But we hear these things all the time.
Yeah.
So
The thing that's really tricky is the physicians who've seen more cases are like this, but the course of this is so unpredictable that the idea that, like, you know, on day 7 I stood on one foot for an hour and then on day 8 I started feeling better, like, that'll happen, right?
It's true. So Dr. Heller, as you're going through these trials, how do you make it so it's highly, highly, highly controlled?
Well, it's a blinded study, so only the people who are giving the vaccine know that it's vaccine or not, because they have to draw the material out of the vial. And as a principal investigator, which I am, I don't know who's actually getting the vaccine or not. It's a 1-to-1 vaccine. One person gets the vaccine, one person gets a placebo. So I don't know who's getting those
Don't know.
the vaccine. So that's how it's controlled, and we see them every month, and we draw antibodies after each vaccine dose, and then the study actually goes out for 24 months to see long-term effects.
Wow.
And that's why the FDA can't approve it until it's over. But as I said, you can get emergency use authorization from the government if it looks like the vaccine is safe and effective, and that can be, by the end of the year.
Just remember, I Am Legend, Will Smith. That was a vaccine. Just saying.
Does anybody know, are they actually doing challenge trials, or is it we're going to ship everybody to Florida for a month and see who gets it?
Good question.
Dr. Heller,
Awesome.
come on, buddy.
Yeah, they've done challenge trials in monkeys, and those seem to be positive. That's out of Oxford, but I don't know about humans yet.
I just wonder how we're going to do this. We just did a very quick poll. More than 60% of people said, nope, not going to take it. What does that marketing campaign look like when something comes out? How do you convince the population this is good for the world? How do you do that? Gosh.
Well, since I'm the marketing guy.
Yeah, John, how do you do that?
When someone talks to me about arthritis, I turn off, right? Because that's my grandmother's disease.
Right.
But if someone talks to me about bone health, as a runner, I listen. So I think that, language is really critical in crafting this. We have the death tax. We have the Patriot Act. All these little levers, and that's going to be the tricky way that this is presented. Not the least of which, look at someone like, what were some of the pivotal moments about HIV? Well, Rock Hudson came out, and that changed sort of the mind share, the mindset. So I think that's going to be a real interesting challenge, about crafting that language and then who sells it in too. And again, it might not be one story. It might be a little bit more complicated. It might be multiple stories.
Dave Winston, you're literally right there in the center of government. Is there some type of campaign that's being crafted right now when something's out to start to move forward? You've been polling like crazy. Are your numbers similar to ours? One, people are not going to take it right away. And two, once something comes out, is there a marketing campaign that's being developed?
Two things. One, actually, John's construct is actually quite spot on. Having said that, I'm getting a higher percentage than the group here in terms of who'd be willing to take it, but also I was putting it farther into the future when it comes out like next year. Right now, I think there'd be a lot of people who would be like, okay, why did it just happen right this second? Having said that, I don't know of anything at this point in terms of what's going on to sort of put together a sort of advertising support to sort of drive this. But also, and again, everybody here in the medical side of this knows that there are doubts about vaccines for whatever reason. And so you still look at a significant level of the population that's not sure about them. I think overall there needs to be more support to show the validity of vaccines and how they work. And so it's a broader question. But I do think what we need to begin to think through as we sort of move toward this is, in fact, how do we get people to feel confident of it? Because again, to some degree, you're injecting something into somebody that's a very small version of it, but nonetheless, people are scared of that.
I agree. And just to follow up on that, we're fast tracking therapy, but are we fast tracking the communication that correspond? All of a sudden, we have a vaccine available come the end of 2020. Then someone's going to say, oh, now how do we position this? How do we market this? And they're going to stumble. And that may be the biggest tragedy. So I think fast tracking a communication strategy might be interesting if it's not being already done.
Gosh.
Do you want to ever get on a plane again? You want this?
Well, that's the other question. Let's talk about something that I'm starting to hear pop up, and that is people apparently are getting infected through their eyes. Is that possible? I know if we touch our eyes, I get it, but with all these droplets of what Eric said earlier regarding how there's so many droplets that are floating around the air, can we get affected or infected through our eyes? Thoughts?
Who's the NBC correspondent who said he was infected?
That's right.
Now he is not testing positive. So there was a big brouhaha about ocular transmission. And now he's not testing positive. And I don't know if that's just some artifact. There seems to be people who are clinically sick who are testing negative, which is a whole nother interesting thing. So I'll throw it back to the group about the eye, but why not? Why can't you be infected through the eye?
Daniel?
I think it's a conduit of mucosa.
Yeah.
Virus get in, and eventually there's tracks from your eyes to your nose when you cry, etc. There's passageways, so it would get to your respiratory tract that way. So it's totally reasonable if you rub your eyes, or someone sneezed and you shook their hand. I want to ask a question back to the marketing thing. If anyone here is willing to say, let's say it's a year from now. Let's say the vaccine came out end of this year, and it's a year from now, and it seemed to be going okay. Are there still folks who say they wouldn't take it? It was the question you asked earlier in the poll. If it just came out today, so I think it's interesting.
Do you want me to ask that question now?
Well, it don't have to be a poll. I mean, if anyone wants to speak up and said that I would not take it under any circumstances, because I think the evil, I don't know.
Gates nanobots.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm actually, Daniel, I'm going to get my vaccine in one arm and my chip in the other. I'm just going to do it simultaneously and just go completely to the dark side.
All right, let's.
Can I add something on the marketing part?
Let me real quick. Gary, go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, let's jump back to the eye thing. I'm an ophthalmologist, and absolutely this, in my opinion, can be transmitted through the eye. We deliver drugs through the eye routinely, eye drops, get into the bloodstream. There's many other infectious things that can get transmitted through the eye, like chlamydia, etc. So yeah.
Yeah, I'll say as a first responder, our infectious pathogen training always includes you got to wear goggles. Yeah. I don't, maybe this is not like that, and it's really difficult and unlikely, but certainly if you're intubating somebody and there's all kinds of stuff coming at you, you'd be crazy not to wear goggles. And like there are lots of precedents for things that get transmitted.
So true, isn't it? Like I don't know about you guys. When I'm going to go to Costco in a little while. I'm wearing glasses at least, and a mask and gloves. I mean, I look like I'm ready to do surgery, but I feel like that's what it is. You're going in you have to save your life. You have to keep your life okay.
The whole World War I gas mask thing, they really like it when you
face shields. Ken Dubner saying face shields. I agree. Yeah. So, Daniel, as we wrap this up, I just want to get kind of your moving forward. Do you think the United States is going to lead, maybe even Robert Heller or whoever else is in trials? Is this where it's going to come from, being the vaccine? Is this not just the epicenter of the virus, but also maybe the cure for it? Thoughts?
No, I think the Russians are going to steal it from us.
Yeah, right.
No, it's the Chinese.
The Russians are going to steal it from the Chinese.
There you go. Now we got it.
I don't know that we could say, there's Moderna, there's several other, yes, we have several leading candidates, but it could be that the Oxford guys have it or China already has it. They've already started giving it to their military folks at scale. So I would not bet that it's going to come from the US. And again, it may be different variants. It might match different people. Some might work in older folks, et cetera. We have a lot to learn.
Would you guess if it's invented in China? Obviously, there's no country in the world where they invent it and don't give it to their whole population first. So I don't blame them for that. But is this going to be somehow open sourced and companies all over the world?
Let's ask Dr. Heller that. Dr. Heller, what happens? A virus or this vaccination comes out, vaccination first. Does it open source or what happens to it globally?
It's up to the country and the sponsor who's producing it. So yes, it could go to anyone they choose, but most of the time it'll be humanitarian and it'll go to the country where it's been developed, and then when there's enough doses, it'll be distributed through other countries. It could be that China will develop this first because it was a different to the United States.
It was a different era, but look back to Jonas Salk and polio. Where there was no profit made there. And that, I believe, that was an attenuated, a live virus that he did, which was completely against conventional scientific wisdom. That was an aberrant path that people said was dangerous, shouldn't be done. So who knows?
I know that, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
I know that Pfizer is going to not make a profit on the first year of distribution and manufacturing of the vaccine. Of course, after that they will, but for the first year, they've agreed not to make a profit.
Got it. So are we all in agreement then? Let me just make sure. We're first, face mask. Heck yeah, wear a face mask. Number 2.
Social distancing first.
Social distancing first.
Yeah.
Okay. Next is face masks. Number 2 is kids should not be going back to school. And are we saying kids, are we going all the way up to college? College should kind of still be a streaming service. Is that what we should see? Competing with Netflix. Harvard versus Netflix. But maybe, again, we need to make sure we're in that streaming world for college staying away. What do you think, Daniel? Should we see the universities kind of hold off till next semester?
I mean, they already are. Like, my daughter's going to start high school, and right now, I mean, senior year, they're going to do one-day cohorts and shift through the week. I think Harvard's going online, but I think maybe you or someone else tweeted out the only difference between Netflix is $50,000.
Yeah, I did. Me.
And so this is going to be like we've talked on prior sessions, like COVID disrupted all sorts of industries and to higher education and where we work and all that. It's going to shift things up, and I think new models are going to emerge, and it may take the star down from Harvard because you can learn a Harvard course in other ways.
Okay, and then we should just be preventative wise, some zinc and C and D. It wouldn't hurt. It'd be a good direction. And then, Daniel, where do you feel, or any of you, where do you feel you get the most accurate information of what's going on that has no bias? You know, like, for example, by the way, watching the news, I watch Al Jazeera. I know it sounds funny. I go outside the United States to find out what's going on inside. Because to me, at least, it's not as bias focused. That's my belief. But where do you feel you get your best information, Daniel?
A couple ways. One, I'm on this WhatsApp group of a bunch of scientist types that are sharing things early and debating them. That's when, so it's not necessarily unbiased, but you're seeing things somewhat early and with a rich cohort. Some folks on Twitter I follow and interact with, like Eric Topol, who is pretty good at like parsing out new studies and synthesizing them. And Sanjay Gupta, like everybody else. I don't think there's one place. I don't think it's from certain people in the White House that you'd be getting the best information, but that's politics, sorry.
No, it is, but I'm just saying, you're saying that there's no single publication, there's nothing online that we could all drive to. It's just individuals.
Yeah.
Maybe people at the NIH.
But by the way, David, you're sending your kid off to college.
Yeah.
You feel comfortable go ahead.
I mean, like he's in Ohio. Ohio's been pretty good. He's in an apartment off campus, so he's not in a giant dining hall. And I think there's a very high probability that they'll plan to be in class for the first 3 or 4 weeks until the first big outbreak happens. They're doing a lot of stuff to try to mitigate. Many classes are online only. What was I going to say? They've got a whole testing regimen they plan to have. Okay. They've got a quarantine dorm that they're going to, as soon as you get sick, they're going to send you off to the quarantine dorm. But, he's 21 years old. We talked it through with him. He is going to be really, he's nervous and plans to be very cautious, but he wants to be there. And he's going to wear a mask and all that good stuff. And, again, he's 21, so I know what
the odds are. You can't hold him there. I get it.
Yeah. No, I'm saying it's also true. The odds that a 21-year-old gets it and has a tragic outcome are.
We don't know. That's the thing that sucks. We don't know yet. We see what the early results are. We don't know what the moving forward or new strain results are. That scares me. Hey, everyone, I want to thank you. Daniel, thanks a lot for putting such a great together. Daniel, are you writing anything? Can we follow you? Are you doing something that you're kind of seeing what you find?
I mean, I try and tweet relevant stuff. I'm working on a book and maybe a documentary platform, but I need to put something more synthesized together. Jordan Schlane, who was on here a month ago with me, has a pretty good synthesis. He puts out these updates that we should make sure you share out every month or so that are good summaries of the state of the art, because it's so much to keep up with. I mean, it'd be a full-time job that I don't have to just keep up with stuff every day.
There you go. Gentlemen, thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing time here. And Daniel, thank you again for bringing John and everybody else for being here. Unmute yourself, everyone, and let's thank Daniel.
Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel.
That was great.
Thank you, guys.
Take care, guys.
Thank you. Bye, guys. Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.